Hello, my name is Dieter and welcome to Some Loosemore, a channel dedicated to the hobby of board games. Now, board games for some, as we have been talking about over the last few months, is something that most people don't think of. It's a certain type of nerdy, geeky that some people don't align themselves with necessarily or think it's for them. But what I wanted to talk about today is the kinds of people that play video games. Now, I love video games. I've had consoles since I was very small. From I think we had a NES, N64, the Game Boys, DS's. I've had an Xbox, got a PlayStation 4. I like video games, and I like very particular kinds. I prefer the big adventure fantasy, Skyrim type games. I know other people like racing games and fighting games and all those sorts of things. And people don't tend to make the link between video games and board games. But I would like to very quickly just tell you, as kind of part of our Gateway series, how do you get friends who like video games to play board games with you? Now, some of the easiest things to think of is that there are now board games based on video games. So there's a Fallout game, there's a Dark Souls game. What else is there? There's a few others. This War of Mine was a very interesting video game, which is now this expensive kind of adventure board game as well. And there's all these experiences that can be had. But if I was to distill it down, depending on what type of gamer they are, if they like racing games, there are racing games, but I'm going to speak from what I know about more. What I like is that sense of discovery and adventure and being able to find out what's in the world and face the different challenges that come along with that. And talking like the Dragon Age type series, that kind of thing, big adventure. And I think what a great genre of board games for that would be many cooperative games. So there's some great ones out there that would work really well for this. The Seventh Continent, Pandemic is really good for this. It's just something that has a very clear narrative that they can grab onto. Most gamers like a good narrative and a sense of exploration and accomplishment as they go along. Now, thinking in terms of a gateway game, I have actually gone for same designer as Pandemic, but a much simpler game for the gateway purposes called Forbidden Island. Now, Forbidden Island is a game for 2 to 4 players, cooperative, as I say, in which players are trying to find all of the treasure on the island and then survive and make it off. The game is set up with these series of tiles with different locations on, each linked to one of the 4 treasures, and it is your job to try and find all of these treasures and make it out. And what you are fighting against essentially is time, as many of these locations can be submerged and sink and make it much harder for you to find these artifacts. Each player has their own character role, which gives them a special power that nobody else has, and they can take 3 different actions on their turn, but then every turn they have to draw flood cards and again submerge these tiles so they're underwater. If ever it cycles through and that tile is used twice, it goes away, it's gone for the rest of the game. The island gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and once they've got it, they have to get the helicopter and leave. Why I think this is a good place to start for people like video games, as I say, there's this sense of improving as you go along. Many video games include kind of leveling up, and that everybody has a special ability. You feel like an individual character, which gives you this sense of narrative and this very clear thematic goal, which most cooperatives have. As I say, Pandemic is another really good choice for this, but I think Forbidden Island is just that step before. Some people might not want to sit down to what looks like a big board game. I know it's not particularly, but a bigger board game like Pandemic, when you say, hey, do you like Uncharted? Let's play Forbidden Island. It's just about grabbing treasure, exactly the same, except it's really quick. You'll want to play it again. I think the first time I played it 2 or 3 times the first time, and I've really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, We don't own it right now. I've had to borrow this as a friend's copy, but I definitely want to get it again. It's high up on my list for games I want to get. And I just think it will introduce people who like video games into this idea, this understanding that the things that they enjoy, the things that exist for them in a video game, does exist in board games as well, and you can convince them of that. Another thing to consider maybe is a legacy game. I know that's not a gateway necessarily, but if they like this idea of narrative, expansive, getting better, things leveling up, things getting harder as they go along, something like Pandemic Legacy, where things just fall apart and get harder and harder and all sorts of crazy things happen, might appeal to them, because you'll play one of these video games for 60 hours or so, getting better, leveling up, facing new challenges. So something like that might appeal to them, but I think to begin with, as a gateway game, Forbidden Island or something like it would work really well. So that's just a few ideas and suggestions. Thank you very much for watching. Do stay tuned for other videos. Do subscribe to this channel. Hit the little bell icon so you stay notified when we put out new videos. You can follow us on Twitter at @WSomeLmore. Find us on Facebook. But until next time, thank you very much for watching. I've been Dieter for Some Loosemore. Goodbye.